Jenny, all these kind of things. I mean, they were all like me in the sense they were versions, they were white versions, but they still weren't anything like my life. You know, so that's still the case. And really, in young people's fiction, certainly, it wasn't until the 70s that people started saying, actually, you know, I want to write something that reflects the lives of actual, real kids. And that process of sort of trying to connect with reality as opposed to create escapism, you know, it's actually a very recent development. And you don't, I mean, I did a debate in Russia about this some years ago, and the Russian professors and writers were saying, I'm a citizen of the world, I don't need to sort of write about my community or read about my community, because, you know, I could be anyone. And for them, they were writing international. Not how I feel about writing at all. I kind of want to write about real people. And because I've written a lot of novels now, my own sort of community, if you like, I've kind of run out of them. Sort of done quite a few, actually, quite a few. You know, I mean, I have, I even now to the extent sometimes I go out and interview people. I mean, I did it in Leeds. I did a book called Kill All Enemies, and I interviewed, I mean, those of you will know, right behind the Corn Exchange, I don't know if they still do it, they all used to parade. All the kids, do they still do it?
Not as often as they did.
Well, they took the Corn Exchange off them, didn't they? And they all used to parade up there, all the you know, the emos and the goths and the punks and the Visigoths and the whole lot. They were all up there. It was gorgeous. And I interviewed some sort of some kids there, and they told me their stories. And I felt as though I was able to write about them and their communities. And that is, and I suppose, you know, the nearest I can get to power is when someone writes to you and says, you know, I read your book, and you know, I recognise myself in it. Or even better, I read your book, and it made me see the world differently. I mean, that's a bit of magic, isn't it? You know? So for me, there is that bit of magic in writing, in that you can set these inventions into motion, and somehow or other they're real, or they're real ideas and real characters and real communities and relationships.
I suppose what you say, so it's probably about transformation, isn't it? Transformative power, but it's also, I guess, in writing, it's fictional, but you're dredging up what's authentic to you, and that's what people respond to. I guess that's the power, isn't it? You know,
well, it's interesting that
you're expressing something that's real for you.
A bunch of lies can tell you truths that facts never can.
That's great. Yeah, that's great, actually. That's tweetable as well, I should just say. You want to tweet #National Writing Day, we're tagging him. No, but it's brilliant. I think there's something for me around authenticity and that being the power of, you know, to enable, to move people, actually, to kind of enable that transformation that we're talking about, whoever the reader is, actually. So for me, you mentioned magic. I think there's also magic in it too, but, you know, it is a power, I think. It's a kind of superpower in a way.
Well, it does feel like magic. I always remember reading one of my military heroes, Kurt Vonnegut, in a speech which he apparently locks the doors. You know, lock all the doors. He says a speech to writers, and saying, I want us all to admit the truth now that it's nothing to do with us, and that he felt as though he was a conduit. You know, which isn't true. I think what he was trying to say was that, you know, he didn't really know where it came from. You know, it sort of seems to be coming up. It's your unconscious mind. You're working in collaboration with your own unconscious mind, which is where the magic happens.
Thank you. Jacob, let's move into
I was just thinking, actually, you know, over the past 10 years, and maybe more than 10, 20 years, there has been a kind of massive preoccupation by cognitive psychologists or all kinds of people into the power of story. And one of the conclusions, and they even have a name for the area of study, they call it narratology. I like that. People say, what do you do? I say narratology. I'm no longer write, I'm a narratologist. I'm no longer write, I'm a narratologist. And what they have, has anybody read this book by this author whose name I can't remember, but it's called Sapiens. Yeah? Sapiens, that's what's getting it. There's only one book by that name. And this is an anthropologist and all that, who tells you about what story really is, and in a way explains why you have left the warm, lovely sunshine out there and come to sit here and listen to us talk about story. A story, in a way, is like milk for the human brain, and it is not by chance that wherever you go in the world, children love stories. There is not a culture where children do not demand stories, and that is not them. That's the brain. That is part of what it means to be human, because it's the only way that you can engage the cerebral, the imaginative, and the emotional at the same time, which is why story is so dangerous in some cultures. I mean, in regimes like in Latin America, and I'm giving you a kind of semi-theoretical perspective, but I think it's useful. Why in Soviet Russia, why the first people they go for when they have their revolution in Chile, they go for the writers and the poets, because they know that there is something that these people are capable of doing. There's something that is so seductive in what they do that we have to stop it. It's the only thing that represents a real danger to this regime that we're establishing is, in fact, this thing that they package so seductively and give to people. And I can talk about the French resistance, and how they use stories, how they use plays in order to. The Germans are there at the front door, and these people are doing their stuff, and they're cussing the Germans and putting them down and planning all kinds of stuff, and the Germans don't know what the hell is going on. So story is very powerful. My personal experience of the power of story, and it really happened, was in 1974, because I was engaged in story for the same reason that both my colleagues here have been. Is to escape. It's the drudge of poverty. It's like you're not happy with the world you're living in, but then you bloody well go and you find one, and you find it in books. It's easy. Or you construct one, but then they think you're crazy if you construct one. So you find it in books. But my experience was in 1974 in this very small island in which where I grew up, where I went to school. We had a government which, to all intents and purposes, was a democracy, but it wasn't. It was a dictatorship. And to be young, articulate, intelligent was almost like you're walking around with a red flag, like a death sentence. You can get shot, you can get disappeared, and so on and so on. That was really there in the mid-1970s. And I remember leaving school, and I was not. No, before I left school, I just knew that I was on a blacklist somewhere because I was one of those students, and I knew that I would not get a job. It's as simple as that, because I was one of those young people. And what I did, what happened then was, I won't go into the details of it, but basically we had a crisis. We call it a crisis. And for 3 months, the island was shut down. The unions went on strike, stores were closed, shops, it was, and we had to live, this island of 100,000 people had to survive, had to live literally through this thing, not knowing where we were going to get the next meal from. And our parents, what they did was they sent us, they would just say, they wouldn't tell us to go find food, but that's what they meant. They would just say, get out of the house, and if you got to come back, bring something to eat. So we go fishing, we go into the hills and find the yams and so on. We did all that. And then I was in the 6th form at the time. I wrote a short story. And it's in my first collection called The Game of Marbles. And it's a story about little boys surviving in a curfew. And there is one in particular. His grandmother is ailing. She is starving. And he is obsessed with playing marbles. And he has one gift. He can use a catapult or slingshot. And at the end of the village, as happened where I lived, there was a man who was clearly a minister of government, and he had not dogs but turkeys. In fact, he had dogs, but turkeys. which was his pride and joy. And he had these turkeys trotting about in his lawn, because it's a known fact, if not here, then at least where I'm from, that turkeys are better guard dogs than dogs. So to guard his property, and it's a story about this young boy, playing a game of marbles to win the iron. We call them ironees, like ball bearings, the iron marbles. And we don't know why he's so obsessed. But at the end of the story, he goes out into the night there with his slingshot, and he breaches this man's fence, and you know, it's all kind of, I think he did lighten and all that stuff. In terms of, and he,
I don't remember the famous one.
and he literally, well, he shot a turkey. You know, and that big Alsatian dog, which you know was there, also as kind of backup to the turkeys, attacked him. He did, and he broke the man's glass doors and so on. I got a lot of outrage. Young kid I was, you know, I had a sense of profound outrage, and I wrote this story. But that's just the triggering point of it. What happened subsequently was amazing. When the schools, the crisis stopped, school opened, because that story was read on the radio by a man who has become a politician now. His name is Paul Roberts. He's still alive and he's still doing well, right? He on the radio because he was the head of whatever programming, and that story was read out on the radio. I went to school the Monday of that weekend. It was on Saturday. My school is on a hill, and I'm always late. I was always late. I'm kind of strolling to school, and I see at the top of this hill, the school is called GPSS, my headmaster. And he is kind of, you know, he had an English education, so he was very English. You know, he had this sort of, and this theater role, that and I was, and then I some say, with Jesus Christ, I'm in trouble. But that's a bit unusual. And I began walking up the hill, and so, and he stopped and just did that. He said, come. And he told me, I want you to go home now, and I do not want you to come back to school until I send to call you. Because, and I found out subsequently, and I was home for 2 weeks, I found out subsequently that as a result of that short story being read out on the radio, the soldiers, we call them the Mongoose Gang, invaded the school, came up and were asking for this boy who wrote this thing, this story thing. And, well, of course, our school was amazing, and the school just shut down. They all, you know, nobody knows which boy you're talking about. What story, you know? Did you hear a story? We didn't hear a story. No, a story. And the headmaster, he was an amazing man. He was called H.D. Baptiste, and he was afraid of no one. He stood up to the government, all that dictatorship. He stood up to them all the way through to the point where they demoted him to a quote-unquote girls' school. But when he went there, they got even radicalized, these girls. That's another story. He was an amazing man, and he was not an agitator. He was very quiet, hardly spoke, but he allowed us to do things that he felt were right. But anyway, this is a long, let me make it very short. They came looking for me, and I went back to that school, maybe a month after, I don't know, and I went back, and he sneaked me back into school. And when I couldn't get a job, he sneaked me into the girls' school to teach. You pay me cash in hand, you know. So, and that's when I realized that the point is, and I just said to myself, yeah, you know, this thing is powerful. This can do some stuff. And that confirmed me to this day in my whole vocation